The Cold War was a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 till the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was called a Cold War because the two superpowers never engaged in direct military combat, but rather competed in a global ideological and economic struggle. At the heart of the Cold War was the disagreement between the United States and the Soviet Union about the nature of government and society. The US promoted democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union espoused communism and planned economies. This disagreement led to a number of conflicts and proxy wars throughout the world, including the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Soviet-Afghan War. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a massive arms race, with each side developing and stockpiling nuclear weapons. This arms race led to a state of constant tension and the threat of nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was perhaps the most intense moment of the Cold War, when the world came dangerously close to a nuclear conflict. The Cold War also had a profound impact on culture, with both the United States and the Soviet Union using cultural diplomacy to promote their respective ideologies. The US exported Hollywood movies and rock and roll music, while the Soviet Union promoted its own art and literature. The Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, but its legacy continues to be felt today. Many of the conflicts and tensions that exist in the world today can be traced back to the Cold War, and the geopolitical landscape of the world was fundamentally changed by the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. So, why was the Cold War called a Cold War? Unlike traditional wars, there was no actual fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a tense and dangerous time. The threat of nuclear war was always present, and there were many moments when the world came dangerously close to a catastrophic conflict. What impact did the Cold War have on culture? The United States and the Soviet Union both used cultural diplomacy as a way to promote their ideologies. The US exported Hollywood movies and rock and roll music, while the Soviet Union promoted its own art and literature. This cultural competition had a lasting impact on the world of art and entertainment. What was the arms race, and why was it so dangerous? Both the United States and the Soviet Union developed and stockpiled nuclear weapons during the Cold War, leading to a state of constant tension and the threat of nuclear war. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was perhaps the most intense moment of the Cold War, when the world came dangerously close to a nuclear conflict. How did the Cold War end, and what was its legacy? The Cold War ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, but its legacy continues to be felt today. Many of the conflicts and tensions that exist in the world today can be traced back to the Cold War, and the geopolitical landscape of the world was fundamentally changed by the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. It's important to note that the end of the Cold War did not immediately bring about a period of peace and stability. In fact, the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union were marked by a number of conflicts and crises, including the Gulf War, the breakup of Yugoslavia, and the Rwandan genocide. The legacy of the Cold War is also felt in the ongoing tensions between the United States and Russia. While the two countries are no longer engaged in a global ideological and military struggle, their relationship remains fraught with suspicion and mistrust. In recent years, there has been growing concern about a new Cold War, this time between the United States and China. As China's economic and military power continues to grow, some experts worry that the United States and China may be headed for a new period of geopolitical tension and competition. In conclusion, the Cold War was a period of tension and conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union that lasted for more than 4 decades. While the two superpowers never engaged in direct military combat, the threat of nuclear war and the proxy conflicts that erupted around the world made it a dangerous and tumultuous time. The legacy of the Cold War continues to be felt today, and it serves as a reminder of the high stakes of geopolitical competition and the importance of diplomacy and dialogue in resolving conflicts. It's also worth noting that the Cold War had a profound impact on the development of international organizations and global governance. In the aftermath of World War II and the onset of the Cold War, there was a growing recognition of the need for institutions that could help to promote peace and cooperation among nations. This led to the creation of a number of key international organizations, including the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank. These institutions played a crucial role in helping to prevent direct military conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union and in promoting economic development and cooperation around the world. Today, the world is facing a number of new and complex challenges, including climate change, pandemics, and the rise of new forms of global competition and conflict. As we confront these challenges, the lessons of the Cold War and the importance of global cooperation and diplomacy remain as relevant as ever. So, what can we learn from the Cold War? One key lesson is the importance of dialogue and engagement between nations, even in the midst of deep ideological and geopolitical differences. While the United States and the Soviet Union were bitter rivals during the Cold War, they also recognized the need to communicate and negotiate in order to avoid catastrophic conflict. Another lesson is the importance of institutions and global governance in promoting peace and stability. The creation of international organizations like the United Nations helped to prevent direct military conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, and these institutions continue to play a crucial role in addressing the complex challenges facing the world today. Ultimately, the Cold War was a period of intense rivalry and competition between two superpowers, but it was also a time of profound change and transformation in the global political landscape. As we look to the future, it's important to remember the lessons of the Cold War and to work together to build a more peaceful and prosperous world for all. Indeed, the legacy of the Cold War has taught us that the pursuit of power and dominance at the expense of others can lead to disastrous consequences. The nuclear arms race, proxy wars, and geopolitical tensions of the Cold War era threatened the very existence of human civilization. But the Cold War also showed us that diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation can help to overcome even the most deep-seated differences between nations. The establishment of communication channels and the signing of arms control agreements, for example, helped to prevent the outbreak of direct military conflict. In addition, the Cold War highlighted the need for a more inclusive and equitable global order. The conflict was not just about ideologies, but also about economic and social systems. As such, it's important to ensure that all nations have a voice in shaping the rules and norms that govern the international system. As we move forward, we must strive to build a world that is characterized by peace, cooperation, and respect for human dignity. This requires a renewed commitment to diplomacy and dialogue, as well as a willingness to engage with others on the basis of shared interests and values. It also requires us to address the underlying drivers of conflict, including poverty, inequality, and exclusion. By working together to build more just and sustainable societies, we can help to create a world that is more resilient to the challenges of the 21st century. In the end, the Cold War was a defining period in world history that left a lasting impact on global politics and society. But it also taught us valuable lessons about the power of diplomacy, the need for global cooperation, and the importance of building a more inclusive and equitable world. Thank you for watching this long video today, and I hope this video will help you.